He left her at the altar, in front of 600 people. Not literally. He stayed for the vows. He slid the ring onto her finger. He even smiled for the cameras. But when the priest said, "You may kiss your bride," Adrian Volkov leaned in close enough that Lillian Hart could smell his cologne. Close enough that she thought maybe, just maybe, this nightmare had an ending she could survive. Then he whispered, "My heart belongs to someone else," and walked away. If you want to know how a woman survives being destroyed in public by the most dangerous man in New York, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The cathedral was perfect. That was the first thing Lillian Hart noticed when the limousine doors opened and she saw the stone facade rising like a fortress against the Manhattan skyline. Perfect arches, perfect stained glass, perfect white roses lining every pew, their petals so flawless they looked fake. She hated it. "Smile, sweetheart." Her father's voice came from beside her, tight and rehearsed. Richard Hart looked like a man who'd aged a decade in 6 months. The lines around his mouth had deepened. His eyes had that hollow look of someone who'd stopped sleeping through the night. Cameras everywhere. Lillian smiled. She'd gotten good at that. The dress weighed 30 pounds. Custom Vera Wang, hand-beaded, with a train that required 2 assistants to manage. It cost more than her college tuition, more than the car her father sold last month to keep the lights on at their house in Connecticut, more than a lot of things that used to matter. Her bouquet trembled in her hands. "You don't have to do this," her younger sister Maya had whispered that morning while helping her into the gown. Maya was 17, still young enough to believe in choices. "We'll figure something out. We always do." But there was nothing to figure out. The Hart family owed Adrian Volkov $3 million. Her father's business partner had embezzled funds, disappeared to South America, and left Richard holding the bag for debts he didn't know existed. When the banks refused to help, when every legitimate lender turned them away, Richard had done what desperate men do. He'd borrowed from the wrong people, and now the bill had come due. "Remember," her father said as they approached the cathedral steps, his hand gripping her elbow just a little too tight. "He's giving us a way out. This is a gift." A gift. Lillian wanted to laugh. Instead, she lifted her chin and walked through the massive wooden doors into a room filled with 600 strangers. The ceremony was a performance. Every seat was filled. Manhattan's elite had shown up in force, not because they cared about Adrian Volkov's happiness, but because refusing his invitation would have been suicide. Literal suicide in some cases. Lillian recognized faces from the society pages. Hedge fund managers, real estate developers, a state senator whose corruption scandals had mysteriously disappeared from the news cycle 3 years ago. And in the front row, on the groom's side, men in expensive suits with hard eyes and hands that rested too casually near concealed weapons. Lillian's side of the church looked sparse by comparison. Her mother, pale and silent. Maya, crying softly into a tissue. A handful of distant relatives who'd come out of obligation, not love. Her father's business colleagues had stayed away. Cowards, all of them. The organ music swelled. Lillian walked down the aisle alone. Her father had offered to escort her, but she'd refused. If she was going to sell herself to save her family, she'd at least do it on her own 2 feet. Every step felt like walking through water. The train dragged behind her like an anchor. 600 pairs of eyes tracked her movement. And at the end of the aisle, waiting at the altar in a black tuxedo that probably cost more than her childhood home, Adrian Volkov. He was taller than she remembered, broader. The photographs hadn't captured the way he occupied space, like gravity bent differently around him. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, eyes the color of winter storms, gray and cold and completely unreadable. He was 34. She was 23. He'd killed people. She'd graduated summa cum laude with a degree in art history. He controlled half the organized crime in New York. She volunteered at a literacy program in the Bronx. This was insane. Lillian reached the altar. Adrian's expression didn't change. No smile, no warmth, nothing. He looked at her the way someone might look at a piece of furniture being delivered, vaguely aware of its presence, fundamentally indifferent to its existence. The priest cleared his throat. Dearly beloved? You can't. The vows were traditional. Adrian's voice was deep, controlled, empty of inflection. He could have been reading a grocery list. When he said, I do, it sounded like a business transaction being finalized. No emotion, no hesitation, just words filling space. Lillian's turn. Her voice shook on the first syllable. She steadied it, forced herself to meet his eyes. They were gray and distant and looking at something behind her, through her, anywhere but at her. I do. The priest smiled like this was normal, like this was beautiful. You may now kiss the bride. The room held its breath. This was the moment. The culmination. The fairy tale ending that everyone pretended to believe in. Lillian had been dreading it for weeks. The thought of kissing a stranger, a criminal, a man who'd bought her like property, it made her skin crawl. But she'd prepared herself. She could do this. She closed her eyes. Adrian leaned in. For a moment, Lillian thought it might actually happen. She could feel his breath against her cheek, could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. Cedar, maybe. Smoke. His hand came up to her waist, light and impersonal. Then his lips brushed her ear, and he whispered, My heart belongs to someone else. Lillian's eyes snapped open. Adrian stepped back. Just one step. But it might as well have been a mile. His hand dropped from her waist. His expression remained perfectly neutral, but there was something in his eyes now. Something cold and deliberate and cruel. He turned away from her. The room erupted. Not loudly, not obviously. But Lillian heard it. The sharp intake of breath from 600 people simultaneously realizing they'd just witnessed something unforgivable. Whispers started immediately. Phones appeared. Cameras flashed. The priest looked panicked. Mr. Volkov! Adrian ignored him. He walked down the aisle, past the shocked guests, past the flowers and the cameras and the chaos erupting in his wake. His shoulders were straight. His stride was unhurried. He looked like a man leaving a meeting that had run 5 minutes too long. Lillian stood frozen at the altar. Her mother gasped. Maya started crying harder. Her father's face had gone white. And Lillian felt something crack open inside her chest. Not her heart. That would have been too poetic, too clean. It was something worse. Her dignity, maybe. Her hope. The small, stupid part of her that had thought maybe this wouldn't be as bad as she feared. That maybe Adrian Volkov, despite everything, despite the rumors and the violence and the blood on his hands, might treat her with basic human decency. Wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. The cathedral stayed silent for exactly 10 seconds. Then the chaos hit. But the reception was worse. They held it at Adrian's hotel, the Volkov, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in Midtown that catered to oligarchs and celebrities and people who needed their secrets kept. The ballroom could hold 1,000. Tonight it held 600 very uncomfortable guests and one groom who'd disappeared the moment the cars arrived. Lillian stood in the bridal suite, still in her wedding dress, while her mother fussed with the train and Maya hovered nearby, looking ready to commit murder. He embarrassed you, Maya hissed. In front of everyone, you should leave. Just walk out. Let him explain that to his criminal friends. And go where? Lillian's voice came out flatter than she intended. Back to Connecticut? To the house we're losing next month? To the life that doesn't exist anymore? There has to be another way. There isn't. Her mother's hand stilled on the dress. Patricia Hart looked like she'd been crying for hours. Probably had been. Lillian, sweetheart, if you want to back out. I signed the papers yesterday. Lillian met her mother's eyes in the mirror. The marriage is legal. The debt is forgiven. We're done. But he humiliated you. I'll survive. She wasn't sure she believed that, but she said it anyway. Someone knocked on the door. One of Adrian's men, Victor, tall and broad-shouldered with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He'd been introduced as security, but Lillian knew what that meant. Enforcer, killer, the kind of man who made problems disappear. Mrs. Volkov, he said, his accent thick Russian. Guests are waiting. Mrs. Volkov. The name felt like a caller. Lillian smoothed her dress, checked her reflection one last time, and walked out to face 600 people who'd just watched her get destroyed. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, tables covered in white silk and gold accents, a champagne fountain in the corner, a 12-piece orchestra playing softly near the dance floor. It looked like something from a magazine spread about impossible wealth. And at the center of it all, conspicuously absent, the groom. Lillian entered alone. The room didn't go silent this time. That would have been too kind. Instead, the whispers intensified. She could feel eyes tracking her movement as she made her way to the head table. Cameras clicked, phones tilted in her direction. Tomorrow, she'd be a meme, a headline, a cautionary tale. Tonight, she had to pretend none of it mattered. She sat. A waiter appeared immediately, offering champagne. Lillian took it, drained half the glass in one swallow. It tasted like expensive regret. Her father materialized beside her, looking haunted. Lillian, I'm so sorry. I never imagined he'd... It's fine. It's not fine. What he did was, I said it's fine. Lillian set down the champagne glass harder than necessary. You got what you wanted, didn't you? The debt's gone. The house is safe. Maya can finish high school without worrying about eviction notices. We won. This is what winning looks like. Richard flinched like she'd slapped him. Good. Before he could respond, the orchestra shifted to a waltz. The opening notes of the first dance drifted through the ballroom. Tradition dictated that the bride and groom would take the floor now, share their first dance as husband and wife, smile for the cameras while pretending their marriage wasn't a complete disaster. Lillian looked toward the entrance. No Adrian. Of course not. The music continued. Guests started glancing around, confused. The whispers grew louder. How long were they supposed to wait? Would he even show up? Was this marriage already over? Lillian stood. Every eye in the room locked onto her. She walked to the dance floor alone. The orchestra faltered. The conductor looked panicked, glancing toward someone off to the side, probably one of Adrian's men, trying to figure out what the hell to do. Lillian stopped in the center of the floor. She was done being humiliated. If Adrian Volkov wanted to destroy her in public, fine. But she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of watching her crumble. She wouldn't hide, wouldn't cry, wouldn't run. She lifted her chin and held out her hand toward the crowd. Anyone want to dance? For 3 excruciating seconds, nobody moved. Then Victor, the scarred enforcer who'd knocked on her door earlier, stepped forward. He looked uncomfortable, completely out of his element. But he crossed the ballroom, took her hand with surprising gentleness, and placed his other hand on her waist. The orchestra started playing. They danced. Victor was surprisingly good. He led smoothly, his steps confident despite the absurdity of the situation. Lillian followed, her dress swirling around them, her smile fixed in place like armor. Around them, other couples began joining the floor. The tension broke. Conversation resumed. The reception continued as if everything was normal. But Lillian knew the truth. Nothing about this was normal, and nothing would ever be normal again. Hotard. Adrian appeared 2 hours later. Lillian was making small talk with a woman who owned half of Manhattan's art galleries, pretending to care about an upcoming exhibition when she felt the room shift. That's the only way to describe it. The air pressure changed. Conversation stuttered. People moved without seeming to realize they were moving, creating space, clearing a path. He walked through the ballroom like he owned it, which technically he did. The tuxedo jacket was gone. His tie was loosened. He looked like he'd been in a meeting, not at his own wedding reception. Several of his men followed at a respectful distance, Victor among them, his expression carefully neutral. Adrian's eyes swept the room and landed on Lillian. He approached. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to do anything except stand there and face him, but her legs wouldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, champagne glass clutched in her hand like a lifeline. He stopped 3 feet away. We need to talk. His voice was quiet, controlled, the same tone he'd used during the ceremony, empty of everything except authority. Lillian's fingers tightened on the glass. Now you want to talk? Not here. He glanced around the ballroom. Upstairs, penthouse. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, you are. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But the certainty in his voice made it clear this wasn't a request. Adrian Volkov didn't make requests. He gave orders, and people obeyed. Lillian set down her champagne. Fine. She followed him out of the ballroom, through a private elevator bank, into a lift that required a keycard to access the top floor. The doors closed. They rode up in silence. The penthouse was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, modern furniture in blacks and grays, original artwork on the walls, pieces Lillian recognized from auctions that made international news. A Rothko, a Basquiat, a small Monet that probably cost more than her entire education. Adrian crossed to the bar, poured 2 fingers of whiskey, drank half of it in one swallow. Lillian stayed near the elevator. "You can sit," he said without looking at her. "I'd rather stand." "Suit yourself." He finished the whiskey, poured another. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Lillian couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you do it?" "Do what?" "You know what." Adrian turned to face her. In the dim light of the penthouse, his eyes looked darker, harder. "I told you the truth. My heart belongs to someone else. I thought you deserved to know before—" "Before what? Before you dragged me through the most humiliating experience of my life in front of 600 people? How generous!" "It's not personal." Lillian laughed. It came out sharp and bitter. "Not personal? You bought me, married me, and rejected me at the altar. How is that not personal?" "This is a business arrangement," Adrian said flatly. "Your father owed money. I needed—" He stopped. Reconsidered. "I needed a wife. For appearances. For legitimacy. This solves both problems." "And the woman you love? Where is she?" Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or rage. It was gone before Lillian could name it. Dead. The word hung in the air between them. Lillian's anger faltered. Not disappeared. She was still furious, still humiliated, still ready to throw something at his perfect face. But underneath the rage, she felt something else. Curiosity. "What happened?" "That's not your concern." "I'm your wife. Doesn't that make it my concern?" "No." Adrian set down his glass. "Here's how this works. We're married on paper. That's where it ends. You'll live at my estate in Westchester. Separate wing, separate staff, separate life. You'll attend events when required. Play the role, smile for cameras. Beyond that, we don't interact." "You're serious. Completely. So I'm just, what, decoration?" "If you want to phrase it that way." Lillian stared at him. This man, this stranger she'd just pledged her life to, was standing in front of her explaining that their marriage would be a performance, a lie, a beautiful, expensive cage that she'd agreed to lock herself inside. And the worst part? She'd known. Deep down, she'd known it would be like this. Had known from the moment her father explained the situation. Had known when she signed the papers. Had known when she walked down that aisle. But some stupid, naive part of her had hoped, "I want to go home," she whispered. "This is home now. I want to see my family. You can visit, with security. I want—" Her voice broke. She hated that it broke, hated the weakness of it. "I want you to at least pretend to give a damn." Adrian's expression didn't change. "I can't give you what I don't have." And there it was. The truth, stripped of pretense. He wasn't capable of love, wasn't capable of warmth. Whatever humanity had existed in him before, it was gone. Buried with the woman he'd lost. All that remained was this, a cold, efficient machine wearing a man's face. Lillian felt something inside her go numb. "Fine," she said quietly. "Separate wings, separate lives. I'll play my part, but don't ever expect me to forgive you for what you did today." I don't." She turned toward the elevator. "Lillian!" She stopped, didn't turn around. "Your family's debt is cleared," Adrian said. "The house in Connecticut is yours, free and clear. Your sister's college fund has been established. Your mother will receive a monthly allowance. You upheld your end of the bargain. I'll uphold mine." "How noble." "I'm not noble, but I keep my word." Lillian stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Adrian standing alone in that enormous penthouse, surrounded by priceless art and expensive furniture and absolutely nothing that mattered. He looked like the loneliest man in the world. She told herself she didn't care. She was lying. The estate was an hour north of Manhattan. Lillian made the drive the next morning in a black SUV with tinted windows, flanked by 2 security vehicles. Victor drove. He didn't speak. Neither did she. They passed through wrought iron gates, up a winding driveway lined with old-growth trees, and finally stopped in front of a house that made her Connecticut home look like a garden shed. Calling it an estate was underselling it. It was a compound. The main house was Georgian style, all brick and white columns and symmetry. But surrounding it were other structures, a guest house, a security building, what looked like a greenhouse, and in the distance, stables. The grounds stretched out in every direction, manicured lawns, gardens that probably required a full-time staff, a prison with pretty landscaping. Victor opened her door. "This way, Mrs. Volkov." They entered through the front, a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably weighed more than a car. A woman in her 50s appeared immediately, dressed in a simple gray dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Mrs. Volkov, welcome. I'm Margaret, the estate manager." Her accent was British, her smile professional but warm. "Mr. Volkov asked me to show you to your quarters." Quarters. Not room, not suite. Quarters. Like she was military personnel being assigned a bunk. Lillian followed Margaret through hallways that could have been museum exhibits. Original paintings, sculptures, furniture that looked antique and fragile. Everything was perfect. Everything was cold. They climbed a sweeping staircase to the second floor, turned left, walked down another hallway, and finally stopped at a set of double doors. "Your wing," Margaret said, opening them. "Wing." The suite was bigger than Lillian's entire childhood home. Living room with a fireplace, bedroom with a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a castle. Walk-in closet, already filled with clothes in her exact size, dresses, shoes, jewelry, everything she could possibly need. Bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. Private balcony overlooking the gardens. It was beautiful. It was suffocating. "Mr. Volkov's wing is on the opposite side of the house," Margaret explained. "You won't run into him unless you go looking. Meals can be served here or in the main dining room, your choice. Staff is available 24 hours. If you need anything at all, just ask." Lillian nodded numbly. Margaret's expression softened slightly. "I know this is an adjustment, but the staff here, we're good people. We'll take care of you. Thank you." Margaret left. Lillian stood alone in the center of her beautiful prison and finally let herself cry. Not because of Adrian's cruelty at the altar, not because of the humiliation or the whispers or the cameras, but because this was her life now. This silence, this distance, this carefully constructed emptiness. And there was no escape. 3 days passed. Lillian didn't see Adrian once. She explored the estate. The gardens were actually stunning. The library held thousands of books. The kitchen staff made incredible food that she barely touched. She called her family. Her mother cried. Maya was furious on her behalf. Her father apologized for the 100th time. She told them all she was fine. Another lie. On the 4th day, Margaret knocked on her door. "Mrs. Volkov, there's a charity event tonight in Manhattan. Mr. Volkov requests your attendance." "Requests. Right. What kind of event?" "Gala, cancer research, very high profile. Dress is formal." Of course it was. Lillian found a gown in the closet, midnight blue, elegant, expensive. It fit perfectly because, of course it did. Adrian had probably had her measurements sent to a dozen designers. Everything about this life was predetermined. Controlled. The car came at 6. Victor drove. Again. Lillian was starting to wonder if he ever slept. They arrived at the plaza. Cameras everywhere, red carpet, reporters shouting questions. Lillian stepped out of the car alone, no Adrian in sight, and immediately heard someone call her name. "Mrs. Volkov, over here, how's married life?" She smiled, waved, kept walking. Inside, the ballroom was packed with Manhattan's elite, the same faces from the wedding, the same whispers. But tonight, Lillian had armor. A perfect dress, perfect hair, perfect makeup. If she was going to be Adrian Volkov's decorative wife, she'd at least look the part. She found her table. Adrian was already there. He stood when she approached, the first gesture of basic courtesy he'd shown her. He was in a tuxedo again, His hair was perfectly styled. He looked like old money and new danger wrapped in expensive fabric. Lillian, he pulled out her chair. She sat without looking at him. The dinner was excruciating. Forced small talk with strangers. Questions about the wedding, about married life, about how happy they must be. Lillian smiled through all of it, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, played the role perfectly. Adrian barely spoke. But when someone at the table made a comment about newlywed bliss, she felt his hand cover hers on the table. The touch was shocking. Not because it was intimate. It wasn't. His hand was cold and impersonal, but because it was the first time he'd touched her since the wedding. He leaned in slightly. To anyone watching, it looked affectionate. "Smile," he murmured. "They're watching." Lillian smiled. His thumb brushed across her knuckles once, twice, a performance for the cameras. Then he pulled away. The rest of the evening blurred together. Speeches about cancer research, an auction that raised obscene amounts of money, dancing, though Adrian didn't ask her. Instead, she danced with donors and politicians and men who looked at her like she was a trophy Adrian had won. Maybe she was. Around midnight, as the event was winding down, Lillian excused herself to the restroom. She needed a moment, just one moment away from the performance. The ladies' room was blessedly empty. She stood at the sink, staring at her reflection. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect lie. The door opened. A woman walked in, older, maybe 60, with the kind of elegance that came from old money and good genes. She wore diamonds that could have funded a small country. Their eyes met in the mirror. "You're Adrian's wife," the woman said. Not a question. Lillian nodded. "I knew his mother." The woman moved to the sink beside her, began washing her hands. Natalia, beautiful woman. Tragic what happened to her. Lillian's curiosity stirred. Adrian had never mentioned his mother, never mentioned family at all. What happened? The woman's expression flickered with something, pity, maybe, or warning. "You really don't know anything about him, do you?" "No." Smart girl would keep it that way. She dried her hands, checked her lipstick. "But you don't strike me as the type to follow good advice. So here's something free. Adrian Volkov loved exactly one person in his life. She died. Badly. That man you married? He died with her. What's left is just—" She trailed off, searching for the word. "Survival." Who was she? Wrong question, darling. You should be asking, what is he willing to become to make sure it never happens again? The woman left. Lillian stood alone, her heart pounding. When she returned to the ballroom, Adrian was waiting near the exit. Victor hovered nearby. "We're leaving," Adrian said. They rode back to Westchester in silence. The SUV pulled up to the estate. Adrian got out first, started toward the house. "Wait!" He stopped, turned. Lillian climbed out of the car, her dress rustling in the cool night air. "The woman you loved, Elena. What happened to her?" Adrian's expression went arctic. "How do you know that name?" "I don't. Someone at the gala mentioned they shouldn't have. But they did." Lillian moved closer. "And now I'm asking, what happened?" For a long moment, Adrian didn't answer. Then, "She was killed because of me, because she was with me, because I thought—" His jaw tightened. "I thought I could have both. The life I'd built and the woman I loved. I was wrong." "So you've decided you can't love anyone ever again?" "I've decided," Adrian said coldly, "that everyone I care about ends up dead. So I don't care. Problem solved." He turned and walked into the house. Lillian stood in the driveway, the night air cold against her skin, and realized something that should have terrified her. She understood him. Not agreed with him. Not forgave him. But understood. Adrian Volkov wasn't cruel. He was broken. And somehow, impossibly, that made him more human than she'd given him credit for. She followed him inside to her separate wing, her separate life. But for the first time since the wedding, she wondered, what if she didn't want to stay separate? What if she wanted to understand the man who'd married her out of obligation but couldn't bring himself to fake even the smallest kindness? What if she wanted to find out what he was protecting by keeping everyone at arm's length? Lillian closed the door to her suite. Tomorrow, she'd start asking questions. Tonight, she'd survived another day in Adrian Volkov's world, and that somehow felt like a small victory. The questions started small. Lillian didn't march up to Adrian demanding answers about his dead lover or his criminal empire. She wasn't stupid, but she also wasn't content to fade into the wallpaper of her own life, spending her days wandering through a mansion that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. So she started with the staff. Margaret was the easiest. The estate manager had that particular brand of British practicality that made her approachable despite the formality. On Lillian's fifth morning at the estate, she found Margaret in the kitchen reviewing menus with the chef. "Can I help with something?" Lillian asked. Margaret looked up, surprised. "Mrs. Volkov, you don't need to." "I know I don't need to. I want to." Lillian glanced at the menu plan spread across the counter. "I used to help my mother with meal planning. Before..." She stopped. "Before everything went to hell. Anyway, I'd like to be useful." The chef, a stern-looking woman named Rosa, raised an eyebrow. "You cook?" "Not like you do, but I'm not completely hopeless." Something shifted in Rosa's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Mr. Volkov never eats what I make anyway. Too busy. Too..." She gestured vaguely, searching for a diplomatic word. "Emotionally unavailable?" Lillian offered. Rosa's lips twitched. "I was going to say particular." They spent the next hour going over menus. Rosa taught her which dishes Adrian preferred when he actually bothered to eat at home. Mostly simple things, which surprised Lillian. Steak, roasted vegetables, nothing fancy. The elaborate meals were for guests, for appearances. When Adrian was alone, he ate like a man who viewed food as fuel and nothing more. "He wasn't always like this," Margaret said quietly as they finished up. "When he first bought this estate, he used to..." She caught herself, glanced toward the doorway like someone might be listening. "Never mind." "When was that?" 7 years ago, right after..." Margaret's face closed off completely. "I should get back to work." She left before Lillian could press further. 7 years. Elena had died 7 years ago. Lillian did the math. Adrian would have been 27, young enough to still believe in second chances, old enough to know better than to fall in love with someone in his world. She wondered what Elena had been like. What kind of woman could have cracked through Adrian's armor? What kind of love could haunt someone for 7 years? The house phone rang. Rosa answered it, spoke briefly in rapid Spanish, then hung up and turned to Lillian. "Mr. Volkov will be home for dinner tonight. He's bringing guests." Lillian's stomach tightened. "What kind of guests?" "The kind you dress up for." That evening, Lillian found herself back in the closet that seemed to have an endless supply of designer clothes. She chose a simple black dress, elegant but not trying too hard. Pearl earrings, minimal makeup. The goal was to look like she belonged, not like she was performing, though everything about this life was a performance. She made it downstairs at 7. The dining room was already set, crystal glasses, fine china, candles that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Margaret appeared beside her. "Just so you know," Margaret said quietly, "these men are not like the donors at the gala. They're..." "Criminals?" Margaret flinched. "Business associates." "Right." Headlights swept across the windows. Car doors slammed. Voices carried through the foyer. Deep, male, speaking Russian. Adrian entered first. He'd changed from whatever he'd worn to work into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. It was the most casual she'd seen him. He looked younger like this, less untouchable. Then he saw her standing in the dining room doorway, and his expression went carefully blank. "Lillian, I didn't realize Margaret had informed you." "She did." He studied her for a moment, like he was trying to decide if her presence was a problem or just an inconvenience. "These are business associates. The conversation may be..." "I'll behave," Lillian said dryly. "I know how to smile and nod." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or annoyance. It was gone before she could tell. The other men filed in. 3 of them. All Russian, based on their accents. All wearing expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the violence underneath. One was older, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had seen too much. The other 2 were younger, harder, with eyes that tracked movement like predators. Adrian made introductions. Lillian, this is Dmitry Volkov, my uncle. The silver-haired man stepped forward. Up close, Lillian could see the family resemblance. Same sharp jaw, same cold eyes. But where Adrian was controlled, Dmitry had an edge of something wild, barely contained. So you're the girl who married my nephew. Dmitry's English was perfect, barely accented. He took her hand, kissed it in a gesture that felt more mocking than charming. Beautiful. But then, Adrian always had excellent taste. The way he said it made Lillian's skin crawl. Thank you, she said evenly. The other two men were introduced as Alexei and Sergei, associates, enforcers more likely. They nodded politely but didn't speak. Dinner was tense. The conversation flowed in and out of English and Russian. Lillian caught maybe half of it. Business talk, shipments, territory, percentages. Nothing explicitly illegal, but the subtext was clear. These men moved things: drugs, guns, money, people. Whatever paid. Adrian barely looked at her, but she noticed he positioned himself between her and his uncle. Noticed the way his posture shifted whenever Dmitry spoke. Subtle, protective, almost. Or maybe that was wishful thinking. So, Lillian, Dmitry said during the main course, his voice carrying that same mocking edge. How are you enjoying married life? Adrian treating you well? Every eye at the table turned toward her. Lillian set down her fork carefully. It's been an adjustment. I imagine so. Going from nobody to Mrs. Volkov overnight. Dmitry smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Must feel like a fairy tale. More like a business transaction, Lillian said before she could stop herself. The room went silent. Adrian's jaw tightened. Alexei and Sergei suddenly found their plates fascinating. Dmitry laughed. I like her, he said, raising his glass toward Adrian. She's honest, rare quality in our world. Lillian doesn't know our world, Adrian said quietly. A warning. Then perhaps you should teach her. Dmitry took a sip of wine. Unless you're planning to keep her locked up here like a, what's the phrase? Trophy wife? That's enough. Adrian's voice went flat and dangerous. Dmitry held up his hands in mock surrender. Just making conversation. The rest of the dinner passed in strained silence. When the meal finally ended, Adrian stood abruptly. Dmitry, we have business to discuss. Lillian, you're excused. Dismissed, like a child sent away from the adults' table. Lillian stood, smiled pleasantly at the men who'd barely acknowledged her existence, and left. She made it halfway up the stairs before her hands started shaking. Not from fear, from rage. She'd sat through that entire dinner being talked around, talked about, treated like a piece of furniture. And Adrian had done nothing, just sat there in his cold silence, letting his uncle mock her, letting the whole charade continue. Lillian reached her suite and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. She paced, changed out of the dress, paced some more. An hour passed. She heard voices downstairs, the front door opening and closing, cars driving away. Then footsteps in the hallway outside her suite. They stopped at her door. Silence. Lillian held her breath. A quiet knock. She crossed the room and yanked the door open. Adrian stood in the hallway, still in his white shirt, looking tired in a way she hadn't seen before. Like whatever mask he wore for the world had finally cracked. I apologize for my uncle, he said. Do you? He was out of line. And you let him be. Adrian's expression hardened. Dmitry is complicated. Contradicting him in front of associates would have made you look weak? Made you look like you actually give a damn about your wife. Lillian crossed her arms. Can't have that. You don't understand the dynamics. Then explain them to me. Or is that asking too much? Should I just shut up and smile and play my part like a good little trophy wife? The words landed like a slap. Adrian's eyes went dark. Not with anger, with something else. Something that looked almost like shame. You shouldn't have been at that dinner, he said quietly. I live here. This is supposed to be my home. Where exactly should I be? Somewhere safe. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. Lillian stared at him. Safe from what? Your uncle, your business associates, you? All of it. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a crack in his perfect composure. You shouldn't be part of this world. You should be, I don't know, living your life, dating someone normal, planning a future that doesn't involve men like Dmitri sitting at your dinner table. But I did marry someone like you, and men like Dmitri are at my dinner table. So what am I supposed to do? Hide? Yes. The bluntness of it caught her off guard. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that Lillian could see the exhaustion in his eyes, close enough to see the muscle ticking in his jaw. You want to know about Elena? His voice was rough. She didn't hide. She thought she could exist in my world and survive it. She thought love was enough. It wasn't. What happened to her? She was taken, tortured, killed. They left her body where I'd find it. Adrian's face was stone. They did it to send a message, to teach me what happens when you show weakness, when you care about something more than power. Lillian's breath caught. I spent 3 months hunting down everyone involved, Adrian continued. Every single person who touched her, who hurt her. I made them pay. And when it was over, I made myself a promise. Never again. Never give them another target. Never care about anyone enough to make them a weapon against me. So you married me. I married you because your father owed money and I needed legitimacy. It was supposed to be simple, clean. A transaction that benefited both of us. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the wedding. You weren't supposed to be... He stopped. Wasn't supposed to be what? Adrian stepped back. The walls went up again. Nothing. Forget it. No. Say it. You weren't supposed to matter. The words hung between them. Lillian felt something shift in her chest. Not love. Not even attraction. But recognition. Like seeing your own reflection in dark water. I don't, she said softly. I'm just the girl you're bought to solve a problem. You should be, but you're not acting like it. How am I supposed to act? Scared, quiet, invisible. Adrian's voice was barely above a whisper. You're supposed to take the money and the safety and the comfortable life and ask for nothing else. That's how this works. Maybe I don't want it to work that way. What you want doesn't matter. Then why are you standing in my hallway at 10 o'clock at night explaining yourself to someone who doesn't matter? Adrian had no answer for that. They stood there in the dim light, close enough to touch but separated by everything that had brought them to this moment. Finally, Adrian turned and walked away. Lillian closed her door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She'd cracked something open tonight, some small piece of the armor Adrian wore, and now she couldn't unsee it. The man underneath the monster, the grief underneath the cold. It should have made her run. Instead, it made her want to stay. The next morning, Lillian found Victor in the security office reviewing camera feeds. Can I ask you something? She said from the doorway. Victor looked up, surprised. Mrs. Volkov? How long have you worked for Adrian? 10 years? So you knew Elena. Victor's expression shuddered immediately. I'm not asking you to betray him. I'm asking you to help me understand. Lillian stepped into the room. Everyone keeps telling me I should be afraid of Adrian, should keep my distance, should just take what he's offering and ask no questions. But nobody's telling me why he's like this. What broke him? Elena broke him. Victor's accent thickened. Or losing her did. What was she like? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then, she was light. Where Mr. Volkov was dark, she was light. She made him laugh, made him believe he could be something other than what his father made him. His father? Dmitri's brother. Worse man than Dmitri. Meaner. He raised Adrian to be weapon, to be heir. Elena made him think he could choose different path. But he couldn't. He tried. Was planning to leave. Take Elena somewhere safe. Start over. Victor's jaw tightened. Dmitri found out. He didn't approve. Thought Adrian was weak. Thought he needed lesson. Lillian's blood went cold. Dmitri had her killed? Was never proven. But Adrian knows. Has always known. Victor met her eyes. Is why he keeps Dmitri close. Old saying, keep friends close, enemies closer. Adrian is waiting. For what? Right moment. Right weakness. He will make Dmitri pay, but he must be smart. Must be patient. Dmitri has allies, resources. Moving against him before time is right would mean war. So Adrian's been pretending for 7 years. Not pretending, surviving, planning, building power until he's strong enough to end this. Lillian felt something click into place. All of Adrian's coldness, his distance, his refusal to let anyone close. It wasn't just grief. It was strategy. He was a man playing a long game, sacrificing everything human in himself to win. "Thank you," she said quietly. Victor nodded. "Mrs. Volkov, be careful. Mr. Volkov may seem cold, but that doesn't mean he won't destroy anyone who threatens what he's building, even if he cares about them." "I'll remember that." She left the security office and wandered through the estate, her mind churning. The library called to her. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather chairs, windows overlooking the gardens. It was the quietest room in the house, the most peaceful. Lillian pulled a book at random, some Russian novel she'd never heard of, and settled into a chair. She'd been reading for maybe 20 minutes when she heard footsteps. Adrian appeared in the doorway. He looked surprised to see her. "I didn't think anyone used this room." "Is it off limits?" "No, it's just—" He paused. "Elena used to read here." Lillian's grip tightened on the book. "I can leave." "Don't." Adrian crossed to the shelves, pulled a bottle of vodka from behind several books. A hidden stash. He poured a glass, drank it in one swallow. She liked Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, the heavy ones. Used to try to get me to read them. "Did you?" "No, I told her I had better things to do than read about sad Russians making terrible decisions." "Sounds like she had good taste." "She did." Adrian poured another glass but didn't drink it, just stared at it. "She would have liked you. You're stubborn like she was, didn't know when to quit." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." Lillian set down her book. "Can I ask you something without you shutting down?" "Probably not, but try. Why did you really marry me?" Adrian looked up, genuinely confused. "I told you, your father's debt. That's the excuse, not the reason." Lillian stood, moved closer. "You could have handled that debt a dozen different ways. Could have made your father pay. Could have taken the house. Could have done what men like you do, but you offered marriage. Why?" Adrian's expression went carefully blank. "I needed a wife." "For legitimacy, you said that. But there are 1,000 women who would have married you for money. Women who wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't push, wouldn't care." She stopped a few feet away from him. "So why me?" "You were convenient." "I don't believe you." "I don't care what you believe." "Yes, you do. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. Wouldn't have come to my room last night. Wouldn't be standing in this library drinking vodka at 11 in the morning and talking about the woman you lost." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You should stop." "Stop what? Seeing you as human? Recognizing that under all the ice and control, you're just a man who's been hurting for 7 years and doesn't know how to stop?" "You don't know anything about me." "Then tell me. Explain it to me. Make me understand why you're so determined to punish yourself by staying alone." "Because it keeps people alive!" The words exploded out of him. Adrian slammed the glass down hard enough that Lillian flinched. "Because everyone I care about dies. My mother, my father, Elena, everyone. So I don't care. I don't get close. I don't let anyone matter. It's not punishment. It's survival. For you or for them. Both." Lillian's heart was pounding. She'd never seen Adrian lose control. Never seen the cracks widen this far. "I'm not Elena," she said quietly. "I know. And I'm not asking you to love me." "Good. Because I can't. But you could stop treating me like I'm invisible. You could stop acting like I'm just another problem to manage." She took a breath. "You could try being my friend." Adrian laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "I don't have friends." "Then maybe it's time to start." He stared at her like she'd suggested something impossible. Maybe she had. Adrian picked up the glass again, drained it. "I have a meeting. I'll be gone for 3 days. Don't leave the estate without Victor." "Where are you going?" "None of your concern." He walked past her toward the door. "Adrian." He stopped, didn't turn around. "Thank you," Lillian said, "for telling me about Elena, for letting me see—" She searched for the right words. "For letting me see past the wall." even if it was just for a minute. Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then, she died because I wasn't careful enough. Because I thought I could protect her and still be who I am. I was wrong. Or maybe you were just unlucky. There's no such thing as luck in my world, only power and weakness. I was weak. She paid for it. He left before Lillian could respond. She stood alone in the library, surrounded by books that Elena had once loved, and felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on her. Adrian was right about one thing. She should run. Should take the safety and the money and the distance he was offering and build a life that didn't involve trying to crack open a man who'd sealed himself off from the world. But Lillian had never been good at doing what she should. And something told her Adrian Volkov needed someone who didn't run, even if he'd never admit it. The 3 days Adrian was gone felt longer than they should have. Lillian spent them exploring more of the estate, getting to know the staff, establishing routines that made the place feel less like a prison. She discovered the gardens were maintained by a quiet man named Thomas, who'd worked here for 15 years. The stables housed 3 horses that nobody rode anymore. They'd been Elena's, Thomas told her quietly, and Adrian couldn't bring himself to sell them. More ghosts. On the 3rd evening, Lillian was having dinner alone in the formal dining room when she heard raised voices from the foyer. She stood, moved toward the sound. Adrian's voice, sharp with anger. "I told you not to come here. And I told you we needed to talk." "Dmitri, where's your lovely wife? I'd hate for her to miss this." Lillian's stomach dropped. She should go upstairs. Should hide like Adrian wanted her to. But something made her walk toward the foyer instead. The scene stopped her cold. Adrian stood near the entrance, still in his coat like he'd just arrived. Dmitri was there with 2 men Lillian didn't recognize. The air felt charged, dangerous. "Lillian," Adrian's voice was tight. "Go upstairs." "I don't think so." Dmitri smiled when he saw her. "Mrs. Volkov." Perfect timing. "What do you want, Dmitri?" Lillian's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Just checking in on my nephew, making sure married life is treating him well." Dmitri's eyes were cold. "He seems tense, distracted. I'm concerned." "I'm fine," Adrian said flatly. "Are you?" "Because the deal we discussed last week fell through, and I'm wondering if perhaps you're losing focus, getting soft." The accusation hung in the air. Adrian's expression went deadly calm. "Careful." "Or what? You'll do what you should have done years ago?" Dmitri laughed. "We both know you won't. You're too smart for that, too patient. You'll keep playing this game, keep pretending you're the dutiful nephew, until—" He looked at Lillian. "Until what? Until she gives you a reason to care about something other than revenge? Leave her out of this." "Why? She's your wife. She's already in this." Dmitri moved closer to Lillian. Adrian tensed. "Tell me, dear, do you know what your husband does? What he's capable of?" "I know enough," Lillian said. "Do you know he's planning to kill me?" The room went silent. Lillian's blood turned to ice, but she kept her face neutral. "I know you're not welcome here, and I know my husband asked you to leave." Dmitri studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Interesting, very interesting." He turned back to Adrian. "We'll continue this conversation later. Don't make me come back here, nephew. Next time I might not be so polite." He left, his men following. The door closed. Adrian stood frozen, his hands clenched into fists. "Adrian, I told you to go upstairs." His voice was shaking, not with fear, with rage barely contained. "He was baiting you, and you walked right into it." Adrian turned on her. "Do you have any idea what you just did, what you just revealed?" "I revealed that I'm not afraid of him." "You should be. He's dangerous. He's unpredictable. And now he knows—" Adrian cut himself off, ran both hands through his hair. "He knows you matter." The words settled between them. Lillian's breath caught. "I thought I didn't matter." "You shouldn't," Adrian's voice dropped. "But you stood up to him, defended me. And now he knows I'll react when you're threatened, which means I'm a target." "Yes." Lillian should have been terrified, should have been angry that Adrian had dragged her into this without warning, should have been a lot of things. Instead, she felt something else entirely. "Then I guess you'll have to keep me safe." she said quietly. Adrian stared at her like she'd lost her mind. This isn't a game. I know it's not, but I'm already here. Already married to you. Already caught in whatever war you're fighting with your uncle. She moved closer. So either you push me away and leave me defenseless, or you let me in and we figure this out together. There's no together. There's me and there's everyone else I have to protect. I don't need protecting. I need honesty. I need you to stop treating me like I'm fragile. You are fragile. You're civilian. You don't belong in this world. Maybe not, but I'm in it anyway. Lillian held his gaze. So what's it going to be? Keep lying to me? Keep pushing me away? Or trust that maybe, just maybe, I'm stronger than you think? Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. You remind me of her. Not in looks, not in background, but in this refusal to back down even when you should. The stupid bravery that's going to get you killed. I'm not Elena. I know, but you're making the same mistakes she did, thinking you can survive proximity to me, thinking love or loyalty or whatever you're feeling is enough. I'm not feeling anything except frustration, Lillian lied, and a desire to not spend the rest of my life hiding in a wing of your house while you fight battles you won't explain. Adrian's expression cracked, just slightly, just enough. Dmitri wants war, he said finally. He's been pushing for it for months, thinks I'm weak, thinks marriage has distracted me. He's wrong, but he won't believe that until I prove it. How do you prove it? By taking everything he has, every alliance, every revenue stream, every piece of power he thinks makes him untouchable. Adrian's voice went cold. And then, when he's got nothing left, I'll take his life. The certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Lillian just nodded. Then let me help. You can't. I can. I'm your wife. I have access to places you don't. People talk around me like I'm furniture. I could. No. Adrian's voice was final. Absolutely not. Why? Because I won't make you into what this world requires. I won't turn you into someone who spies and lies and gets blood on their hands. He stepped closer. You stay clean. You stay safe. That's not negotiable. You don't get to make that choice for me. Yes, I do. I'm your husband. And in this world, that means I protect you whether you want it or not. They stood inches apart, both breathing hard, both refusing to back down. Finally, Lillian spoke. Fine. Protect me. But stop pretending I don't exist. Stop treating me like I'm just another obligation. If I'm going to be your wife, really be your wife, then act like it. What do you want from me? Dinner. Once a week. Here. Just us. No business, no guards, no performance. She took a breath. I want to know the man I married, not the monster everyone's afraid of. Adrian looked like she'd asked him to cut out his own heart, but after a long moment, he nodded. Thursday nights, 7 o'clock, 1 hour. Deal. He turned and walked away, his coat still on, his shoulders tight with tension. Lillian stood in the foyer, her heart pounding, and wondered what she'd just agreed to. 1 hour a week with the man who'd built walls so high he couldn't see over them anymore. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt like a beginning. Thursday came faster than Lillian expected. She spent the day trying not to think about it, which meant she thought about nothing else. By 6:30, she'd changed clothes 3 times and felt ridiculous for caring. This wasn't a date. It was a negotiated hour with a man who'd made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her beyond contractual obligation. Still, she settled on a simple gray sweater and jeans. Casual, like this was normal. At 6:55, she walked downstairs to find the formal dining room transformed. The long table that could seat 20 had been replaced with a smaller one. Intimate, set for 2. Candles flickered. Not romantic, just practical lighting. Rosa had outdone herself with the food. Roasted chicken, vegetables that actually looked appetizing, bread that smelled like it had been baked an hour ago. Adrian was already there. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the gardens. He'd changed too, dark jeans, a black sweater, the most casual she'd ever seen him. He looked almost normal, almost human. You came, Lillian said. He turned. I said I would. I wasn't sure you meant it. I keep my word. Adrian pulled out her chair, a small gesture, but it caught her off guard. He noticed her surprise. I'm not a complete barbarian. Could have fooled me. His lips twitched, almost a smile. Sit. They sat. The silence stretched awkward and heavy between them. Rosa appeared with wine, poured 2 glasses, and disappeared like she'd been trained to make herself invisible. Probably had been. Lillian took a sip. So, how does this work? Do we make small talk? Pretend we're a normal couple? I don't know how to be a normal couple. Neither do I. But here we are. Adrian picked up his fork, set it down again. He looked uncomfortable in a way that was almost endearing, like a man who'd forgotten how to do something simple and was annoyed at himself for forgetting. Tell me about your family, he said finally. Your real family, before all this. Lillian wasn't expecting that. Why? Because I know nothing about you except that your father makes bad business decisions and you have a sister. And that's unusual for you, not knowing things about people? Yes. Adrian's voice was flat. I make it a point to know everything about everyone in my world. You're a blind spot. It's irritating. Sorry to irritate you by being a mystery. I didn't say you were a mystery. I said you were a blind spot. There's a difference. Lillian cut into her chicken. My family's boring. Middle class, Connecticut. My dad ran a consulting firm. My mom taught piano lessons. Maya's 17 and wants to be a veterinarian. We had a dog named Chester who died when I was 14. I cried for 3 days. What kind of consulting? The kind that apparently involved trusting the wrong partner and losing everything. The bitterness crept into her voice before she could stop it. My dad's not stupid. He's just optimistic. Believes people are fundamentally good. Turns out that's a terrible quality when you're running a business. Most people are terrible, Adrian said. That's bleak. That's experience. Lillian studied him across the table. In the candlelight, the hard edges of his face softened slightly. He looked tired, really tired, like a man who hadn't slept well in years. What about your family? Oh, she asked. I know your uncle's a nightmare and your parents are dead, but that can't be the whole story. Adrian's expression closed off immediately. There's nothing to tell. I don't believe you. I don't care what you believe. You keep saying that, but you're here, having dinner with me, breaking your own rules about keeping distance, so clearly you care a little bit. Adrian set down his fork with deliberate precision. My father was Dimitri's younger brother. Dimitri should have inherited the family business, but my grandfather chose my father instead. Dimitri never forgave that. When I was 8, my father was killed in what they called a car accident. My mother knew better. She tried to leave, take me somewhere safe. Dimitri stopped her. The words came out flat, emotionless, like he was reciting facts about someone else's life. He killed her too, Lillian said quietly. He had her killed. There's a difference. Dimitri never does his own dirty work. Adrian picked up his wine, drained half the glass. I was 10, old enough to understand what happened, old enough to know I couldn't do anything about it. So Dimitri raised me, trained me, turned me into what he needed, a weapon he could control. Except he can't control you. Not anymore, but it took 20 years to get strong enough to fight back. Adrian's eyes were hard. You want to know why I'm like this? Why I don't let people close? Because Dimitri taught me that everyone you love is a weapon someone can use against you. My father loved my mother. They used her to destroy him. I loved Elena. They used her to teach me a lesson. Love is weakness. Caring is suicide. That's not true, isn't it? Look at you. Look at what happened the moment Dimitri realized you might actually matter to me. He walked into my house and threatened you without saying a word. He doesn't even need to touch you to prove his point. What point? That I'm still weak, still vulnerable, still capable of caring about something more than revenge. Adrian's voice dropped. He's right. The admission hung between them. Lillian's chest tightened. I'm not asking you to care about me. I know, but I do anyway, and that's the problem. They sat in silence for a long moment. The candles flickered. Outside, night had fallen completely, turning the windows into black mirrors that reflected the warm interior back at them. Finally, Lillian spoke. When I was 12, my dad's business almost went under the first time. Different partner, same problem. Someone stole from him. We lost our house, had to move into a tiny apartment in a bad part of town. Maya was 5, and she didn't understand why everything changed, why we couldn't afford her dance classes anymore, why Mom cried when she thought we weren't listening. Adrian listened without interrupting. I promised myself I'd never be that helpless again, never be the kid whose life got destroyed by someone else's choices. Lillian met his eyes. But here I am, my life destroyed by my father's choices. Again. Except you're not helpless, aren't I? I'm trapped in a marriage I didn't want, living in a house that's not mine, playing a role I never auditioned for. But you're not hiding. You're not broken. You stood up to Dimitri. You demanded dinner with me. You're making this life yours instead of letting it swallow you. Adrian's voice softened almost imperceptibly. That's not helplessness. That's survival. Is that what you're doing? Surviving? I don't know what I'm doing anymore. The honesty of it caught them both off guard. Adrian stood abruptly. I need air. He walked out onto the terrace beyond the dining room. Lillian hesitated, then followed. The night was cold, clear. Stars scattered across the sky like thrown diamonds. Adrian stood at the railing, his breath misting in the frigid air. You don't have to run every time something gets real, Lillian said. I'm not running, I'm regrouping. Looks the same from where I'm standing. Adrian turned to face her. You want real? Fine. Here's real. I haven't slept through the night in 7 years. I see Elena's face every time I close my eyes. I see what they did to her. I hear her screaming, and I know, it was my fault. My choice to love her, my failure to protect her, my weakness that got her killed. His voice cracked on the last word. Lillian's throat tightened. It wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. Dimitri killed her. His people tortured her. You didn't do that. I brought her into this world. I made her a target. Same thing. No, it's not. Lillian moved closer, close enough to see the pain etched into every line of his face. You loved someone. That's not a crime. That's not weakness. What Dimitri did, that's evil. That's on him, not you. You don't understand. I understand that you're punishing yourself for something you didn't do. I understand that you've spent 7 years building walls so high you can't even see what's on the other side anymore. I understand that you're so afraid of losing someone else that you won't let anyone get close enough to matter. She took a breath. But here's what you don't understand. I'm already close. I'm already here. And pushing me away won't change that. Adrian stared at her. You should be afraid of me. Maybe, but I'm not. Why not? Because I've seen what's underneath the monster everyone's so afraid of. I've seen the man who keeps his promises, who protects his staff, who rides out every Thursday night to visit his dead lover's grave, even though it destroys him. She paused. Victor told me about the roses you leave, about how you sit there for hours talking to someone who can't hear you. Adrian's jaw tightened. He had no right. He was worried about you. They all are. Margaret, Rosa, Victor, they see what I see. A man who's drowning and won't let anyone throw him a rope. There's no rope. There's just water, and eventually you get tired of fighting. So you're giving up. I gave up 7 years ago. I've just been going through the motions since then. Lillian felt something crack open in her chest. Not pity. Adrian would hate pity. But something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Then stop, she said quietly. Adrian looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Stop what? Stop going through the motions. Stop pretending you're dead inside. Stop punishing yourself for being human. She reached out slowly, carefully, and touched his hand where it gripped the railing. Stop being alone. For a moment, Adrian didn't move. Then his hand turned under hers, his fingers threading through hers with a desperation that took her breath away. They stood like that for a long time, holding hands in the cold darkness. Two people who'd been alone so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. Finally, Adrian spoke. I can't promise you anything. I'm not asking for promises. I can't be what you need. I don't need anything except honesty. I can't... His voice broke. I can't lose someone else. I can't survive it again. Then don't lose me. Let me stay. Adrian pulled his hand away. Not angrily, almost reluctantly, like it hurt to break the connection. We should go inside, he said. They went inside. The rest of dinner was quieter, safer. They talked about inconsequential things, books, music, the ridiculous price of the art in the foyer, normal conversation that felt almost surreal after everything they'd said on the terrace. When the clock struck 8, Adrian stood. Our hour's up. It is. He hesitated like he wanted to say something else, then just nodded and left. Lillian sat alone at the small table, surrounded by the remnants of a meal that had somehow become the most honest conversation she'd had in months. She'd cracked something open tonight, something Adrian had been protecting for 7 years, and she had no idea if that was progress or disaster. The next morning, everything changed. Lillian woke to chaos, shouting in the hallway, footsteps running, Victor's voice barking orders in Russian. She threw on a robe and opened her door to find the normally calm estate transformed into a war zone. Margaret appeared, pale and shaking. Mrs. Volkov, you need to stay in your room. What's happening? There's been an incident. Mr. Volkov is handling it, but what kind of incident? Margaret's expression cracked. Someone tried to kill him last night after dinner. Lillian's blood turned to ice. Is he hurt? No, but they came close, too close. He's downstairs now trying to figure out who. Lillian pushed past her, running for the stairs. Mrs. Volkov, wait. She didn't wait. The main level was swarming with Adrian's men. Victor stood near the entrance with 2 others, all of them armed, all of them looking ready for war. Through the open door to Adrian's office, Lillian saw him. He was alive, whole, but his shirt was torn, blood staining the sleeve. His face was set in an expression of cold fury that made her instinctively step back. Then he saw her. What are you doing down here? His voice was sharp. I told Margaret. I don't care what you told Margaret. What happened? Adrian's jaw tightened. He looked at Victor. Get her back upstairs. No. Lillian stood her ground. You don't get to shut me out of this. This isn't a discussion. You're right. It's not. Because I'm already involved. Someone tried to kill you. That makes it my business. How exactly does that make it your business? Because you're my husband. The words came out louder than she intended. The room went silent. Every man within earshot turned to stare. So tell me what happened, now. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue. Then something in his expression shifted. Calculation, maybe, or just exhaustion. Clear the room, he said quietly. His men filed out. Victor hesitated. You too, Adrian said. Victor left, closing the door behind him. Adrian and Lillian stood alone in the office, early morning light streaming through windows that suddenly felt too exposed. Someone ambushed my car last night, Adrian said flatly. 3 blocks from here. 4 men. Professional. They disabled the vehicle, moved in with the intent to kill. Victor managed to get us out. But it was close. Dmitri. Most likely, though he'll deny it. He always does. What are you going to do? What I should have done 7 years ago. Adrian's eyes went dark. End this. How? That's not your concern. Stop saying that. Lillian moved closer. Stop trying to protect me from reality. I'm here. I'm in this. And if you're planning to go to war with your uncle, I deserve to know. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he moved to his desk, pulled out a file, tossed it toward her. This is what you're asking to be part of. Lillian opened it. The first page was a surveillance photo of a man she didn't recognize. Dead. Throat cut. The next page showed financial records. Money laundering, she assumed, though the numbers were staggering. The third page was a list of names. Half were crossed out. What is this? Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Dimitri's organization. Every lieutenant. Every revenue stream. Every connection that keeps him powerful. Adrian's voice was cold. The crossed-out names are dead. The others, they're next. You're killing them. I'm dismantling his empire, methodically, carefully. So when I finally come for him, he'll have nothing. No allies, no resources, no way to fight back. How long have you been doing this? 5 years. Since I was strong enough to start without getting caught. Lillian looked at the crossed-out names. 12 of them. 12 men dead because Adrian Volkov was playing a long game of revenge. She should have been horrified. Instead, she just felt cold. "And me?" she asked quietly. "Where do I fit into this plan?" "You don't. You're supposed to be separate, safe, uninvolved. But Dmitri knows about me now, knows I matter to you, so I'm not safe anymore, am I?" Adrian's expression was answer enough. "That's why you married me," Lillian said slowly, the pieces clicking together. "Not just for legitimacy, for protection. You thought if you married someone random, someone meaningless, Dmitri wouldn't see them as a target. You thought you could have a wife on paper without actually caring about her. Yes, but you do care. I shouldn't. But you do." Adrian slammed his hand on the desk. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Yes! Are you happy? Yes, I care. Yes, you matter. Yes? I'm terrified that what happened to Elena is going to happen to you because I was stupid enough to let you get close. Is that what you wanted to hear?" Lillian's heart was pounding. "Yes. Why?" "Because it means you're still human, still capable of feeling something besides rage and guilt." She set down the file. "Because it means there's hope." "Hope for what?" "For you. For this. For—" She stopped, suddenly unsure. "I don't know, but something. Anything except the slow death you've been living for 7 years." Adrian looked at her like she was something fragile he'd accidentally broken. "Hope is dangerous. I know. It gets people killed. I know that too. Then why are you standing here? Why aren't you running?" Lillian moved around the desk until she stood directly in front of him, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, close enough to see the blood on his sleeve was still wet. "Because someone tried to kill you last night, and all I could think about was that we had one dinner, one honest conversation. And if you died, that would have been it. That's all we would have had." "Lillian, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to let me in. I'm just asking you to stop trying to die alone." Adrian's control finally cracked. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with a desperation that took her breath away. It wasn't romantic, wasn't gentle. It was the desperate grip of a drowning man who'd just been thrown a rope and didn't know if it would hold. Lillian held on. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the early morning light, two broken people trying to figure out how to survive what came next. Finally, Adrian pulled back. "If you stay, this gets worse. Dmitri will come for you. He'll use you against me." "Then we make sure he can't." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we figure it out together." Adrian looked at her like she was insane. Maybe she was. But when he nodded slowly, reluctantly, Lillian felt something shift between them. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of something that might become trust. "Victor needs to train you," Adrian said quietly. "Self-defense, weapons, escape protocols. If you're staying, you need to be able to protect yourself when I can't. Okay? And you go nowhere without security. Nowhere. Not to see your family. Not to the store. Nowhere. Okay? And if I tell you to run, if things go wrong and I tell you to leave, you don't argue. You just go." Lillian hesitated on that one. Adrian's expression hardened. "That's non-negotiable." "Fine. I'll run if you tell me to." "Promise me." "I promise." It was a lie. They both knew it, but Adrian let it stand anyway. The next week was a blur. Victor started training her every morning, basic self-defense, how to hold a gun, what to do if someone grabbed her. Lillian was terrible at first. She flinched every time Victor demonstrated a hold, couldn't get her stance right, couldn't remember to breathe. But she got better. By the end of the week, she could at least throw a basic punch without hurting herself. Could field strip a handgun. Could recognize when a situation was about to turn violent. It should have felt absurd. The girl from Connecticut learning how to fight like her life depended on it. Except her life did depend on it. Adrian was gone most days, handling whatever war he was waging against his uncle. But Thursday night, he came home at 7. Lillian was waiting in the dining room. They had dinner, talked about nothing important. But underneath the conversation, something was building. Some awareness that neither of them wanted to name. When Adrian's hand brushed hers reaching for the wine, neither of them pulled away. When Lillian laughed at something he said, Adrian almost smiled. Small moments, fragile, fleeting, but real. 2 weeks after the assassination attempt, Lillian came downstairs to find a stranger in the foyer, a woman, mid-30s, elegant, expensive coat. She turned when Lillian appeared and her expression went cold. "So you're the replacement," the woman said. Lillian's stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" "Elena's replacement. The new Mrs. Volkov. I wondered what kind of woman would marry Adrian after—" She stopped, reconsidered. "I'm Caroline, Elena's sister." The world tilted. Lillian had known, intellectually, that Elena had family, had a life before Adrian. But standing in front of this woman, this living connection to the ghost that haunted their marriage, made it real in a way nothing else had. "I didn't know," Lillian said quietly. "I'm sorry. I didn't what? Didn't know you were living in the house Adrian bought for my sister? Sleeping in the room she decorated? Wearing clothes from the closet he filled for her?" Caroline's voice was sharp with old grief. "Of course you didn't know. Adrian's very good at erasing history when it suits him." "That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" Caroline moved closer. "My sister died because she loved that man. Because she thought she could change him. Thought love was enough. And now here you are, making the same stupid mistake." "I'm not trying to change him." "Then what are you doing?" Lillian didn't have an answer for that. Caroline's expression softened slightly. "Listen, I don't know you. Don't know what arrangement you have with Adrian, but I know him. I know what he's capable of, and I know that everyone who gets close to him ends up dead or destroyed." She reached into her coat, pulled out a card, pressed it into Lillian's hand. "When you're ready to leave, and you will be ready eventually, call me. I'll help you disappear." "I'm not leaving." "Everyone says that. Elena said that. Right up until—" Caroline's voice broke. She steadied it. "Just take the card." Lillian took it. Caroline left without another word. Lillian stood in the foyer, holding a business card from a dead woman's sister, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. That night she told Adrian about Caroline's visit. He went very still. "What did she say to you?" "That I'm making the same mistake Elena made. That everyone close to you ends up dead." "She's not wrong." "Adrian?" "No, she's not." He set down his fork, dinner forgotten. Caroline warned Elena too, begged her to leave. Elena didn't listen, and Caroline's been living with that guilt for 7 years. "It's not her fault." "Isn't it? She knew what I was, knew the danger. She could have done more to stop Elena, could have—" Adrian stopped, shook his head. "I'm doing it again, blaming everyone except the people actually responsible. Dmitri and his men." "Yes. Then blame them. Not yourself. Not Caroline. Not me for choosing to stay." Adrian looked at her across the table. "Why are you staying?" "I don't know yet." "That's not good enough." "It's the only answer I have." They finished dinner in silence. Later, as Lillian was leaving, Adrian caught her hand. "Caroline's right about one thing," he said quietly. "You should leave. While you still can." "I told you I'm not leaving." "You also promised you'd run if I told you to." "That's different." "Is it?" Lillian pulled her hand free. "I'm not Elena. And this isn't 7 years ago. We're going into this with our eyes open. We know the risks, and we're still choosing—" She stopped. "Choosing what?" "Each other, maybe. I think." Adrian's expression cracked, just for a moment, just long enough for Lillian to see the want underneath all that control. Then it was gone. "Good night, Lillian." "Good night." She left before she could do something stupid, like ask him to choose her back. The call came 3 days later. Lillian was in the library, trying to lose herself in a book she couldn't focus on, when Victor appeared in the doorway. His face was grim. "Mrs. Volkov, you need to come with me." Her stomach dropped. "What happened? Is Adrian at—" "He's fine. But there's a situation." Victor drove her into Manhattan in tense silence. They pulled up to a building she recognized, one of Adrian's hotels. The lobby was crawling with police. News vans clustered outside like vultures. "What's going on?" Lillian asked as Victor led her through a side entrance. "Someone was murdered in one of the suites. They're trying to pin it on Mr. Volkov." They rode the elevator to the top floor. The penthouse level had been cordoned off, but the police let them through after a brief conversation with Victor. At the end of the hall, surrounded by detectives and looking like he wanted to murder everyone in sight, stood Adrian. He saw her and something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe. Or just exhaustion. "What are you doing here?" His voice was tight. Victor said, "I told him to bring you. I need—" Adrian looked at the detectives hovering nearby. "Can we have a minute?" They moved off, reluctantly. Adrian pulled Lillian into an empty suite, closed the door. "They're saying I killed Marcus Petrov, one of Dmitri's lieutenants. Found him in a room registered to one of my shell companies with my fingerprints on the murder weapon." "That's insane. Where were you?" "In a meeting with my lawyers, 40 witnesses, airtight alibi." Adrian's jaw was tight. "Which means someone went to a lot of trouble to make this look like my work. Someone who knew exactly how to frame me." "Dmitri." "Almost certainly, but I can't prove it. And the police are treating this like a legitimate case because half of them are on Dmitri's payroll anyway." Lillian's mind raced. "What do you need me to do?" Adrian looked at her like she'd surprised him. "I need you to tell me I'm not losing my mind, that this isn't falling apart before I can finish what I started." "You're not losing your mind. This is Dmitri panicking, trying to take you off the board before you can make your move. Or it's Dmitri proving he's always one step ahead." "No." Lillian moved closer. "If he was ahead, you'd be in handcuffs right now. The fact that he had to manufacture evidence means he's scared. Means whatever you've been doing is working." Adrian's expression cracked. "I don't know if I can do this anymore. Every move I make, he counters. Every play, he's got an answer. I've been at this for 5 years and I'm no closer to ending him than I was when I started." "That's not true. You said yourself you've taken out half his organization, cut off his revenue streams, weakened his alliances. He's desperate. That's why he's making sloppy moves like this." "This isn't sloppy. This is calculated. He killed his own man and framed me for it. He's willing to sacrifice his own people just to hurt me." "Then we need to prove it. Find the real killer. Show the police this is a setup." "With what evidence?" "Dmitri's too smart to leave loose ends." Lillian thought for a moment. "Marcus Petrov, you said he was one of Dmitri's lieutenants." "Yes." "Why?" "Was he loyal?" Adrian paused. "I don't know, maybe. It's hard to tell with Dmitri's people. They're all terrified of him." "But what if Marcus wasn't loyal? What if he was the one talking to you, giving you information?" "He wasn't. I would have known." "Would you? If he was careful enough? If he was feeding you intel through intermediaries?" Lillian's mind was spinning now. "Think about it. Dmitri finds out one of his own people is betraying him. He kills the traitor and frames you for it. 2 problems solved. Gets rid of the leak and puts you in a position where you have to waste time and resources defending yourself instead of attacking him." Adrian stared at her. "That's actually plausible. So how do we prove it?" "We'd need to find evidence that Marcus was working against Dmitri. Communications, money trails, something. Where would that evidence be? If Marcus was smart, somewhere Dmitri couldn't find it. Safety deposit box maybe, or with someone he trusted. Did he have family? A sister, lives in Brooklyn." Adrian pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in rapid Russian for 2 minutes, then hung up. "Victor's sending someone to talk to her. If Marcus left anything behind, we'll find it. What do we do in the meantime?" "You go home. I deal with the police." "No." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "That wasn't a request. I don't care. I'm staying." "Lillian, you said I'm part of this now, so let me be part of it. Stop trying to protect me from reality." They stared at each other, neither willing to back down. A knock on the door broke the standoff. One of the detectives poked his head in. "Mr. Volkov, we need to continue the interview." Adrian's expression went cold and professional again, the mask sliding back into place. "I'll be right there." The detective left. Adrian turned back to Lillian. "Stay in this room. Don't talk to anyone. Don't leave until Victor comes to get you." "Fine." He started to leave, then stopped, turned back. For a moment, Lillian thought he might say something. might crack that armor one more time. Instead, he just looked at her like he was memorizing her face. Then he left. Lillian spent the next 3 hours pacing the empty suite, drinking terrible coffee from a machine down the hall, and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Finally, Victor appeared. "We need to leave. Now." "What happened?" "They're letting Mr. Volkov go, for now. But we found something. Marcus's sister had a storage unit, full of documents, evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Everything." Victor's expression was grim. Marcus wasn't just betraying Dmitri. He was keeping insurance. Records of every deal. Every murder. Every crime Dmitri's committed for the last 15 years. It's enough to bring down his entire organization. Lillian's heart pounded. "Where's Adrian?" "Meeting with his lawyers, figuring out how to use this without getting killed in the process." They drove back to Westchester in silence. When they arrived, the house was dark except for a few lights on the ground floor. Lillian went straight to her suite, changed into comfortable clothes, and tried to sleep. She couldn't. Around midnight, she heard a car in the driveway. Footsteps. Adrian's voice giving quiet orders to someone. Then silence. Lillian lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was it. If they'd finally found the weapon they needed to end Dmitri. If after 7 years of planning and pain, Adrian might actually get his revenge. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she just felt hollow. The next morning, Adrian was gone before Lillian woke up. Margaret found her in the kitchen, looking lost. "He left early, said he'd be back tonight." "Did he say where he was going?" "No, but Victor went with him, and half the security detail." Margaret's expression was worried. "Whatever's happening, it's big." Lillian spent the day trying to distract herself. She worked in the garden with Thomas, helped Rosa plan next week's menus, called her mother and listened to stories about Maya's college applications. Normal things, grounding things. But underneath it all, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. Adrian came home at 6. Lillian heard the car, heard his footsteps in the foyer, heard his voice speaking to someone on the phone in clipped, angry Russian. She waited in the library, heart pounding, until he appeared in the doorway. He looked exhausted, worse than exhausted, destroyed. "What happened?" Lillian asked. Adrian crossed to the bar, poured vodka, drank it, poured another. "Dmitri knows. About the evidence. About Marcus's insurance policy. Someone tipped him off." "How is that possible?" "I don't know, but he knows. And he's already moving to contain it, bribing officials, threatening witnesses. By the time we can actually use any of that evidence, it'll be worthless." Adrian slammed the glass down. 5 years, 5 goddamn years I've been planning this. And he's going to walk away clean because someone in my organization is feeding him information. "You have a leak." "Obviously." "Who?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Adrian's voice was bitter. "Could be anyone. Could be multiple people. Dimitri's had 40 years to plant moles in every corner of this city. I've had 5. Lillian moved closer. "So what do we do?" "We? There is no we. This is my problem. Stop it. Stop pushing me away every time things get hard." "I'm not pushing you away. I'm being realistic. This is my war, my failure. You shouldn't be anywhere near it." "Too late. I'm already here." Adrian looked at her with something that might have been desperation. "You could leave. Take Caroline's card. Disappear. Start over somewhere Dmitri can't find you. Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter." "Answer the question." Adrian was silent for a long moment, then, "No, it's not what I want, but it's what's smart, what's safe." I don't care about safe. You should." "Well, I don't." Lillian closed the distance between them. "I care about you, about this, about finding whoever's betraying you and making sure Dmitri doesn't win." "Why?" The word came out raw. "Why do you care? You barely know me. This isn't your fight." "Because someone has to. Because you've been fighting alone for 7 years and it's killing you. Because..." She stopped, unsure if she should say it. "Because what?" "Because when I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see a man who's been hurt so badly he's forgotten how to let anyone help him. And I can't just walk away from that." Adrian stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "You're insane." Probably. You should be terrified of me. I know. I've killed people, dozens of them. I'll kill more before this is over. I know that too. Then why are you still standing here? Lillian didn't have a good answer for that, so she just told the truth. Because the first time I saw you crack, really crack, and show me what's underneath all the ice and control, I saw someone worth fighting for. Someone worth staying for. Adrian's control finally shattered. He pulled her against him, his hands fisting in her hair, his forehead pressing against hers. Not a kiss. Something more desperate, like he was trying to absorb her certainty through proximity. I can't lose you, he whispered. I can't do that again. I can't. You won't. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. They stood like that, holding each other in the dim library while the world outside prepared for war. Finally, Adrian pulled back. If we're doing this, really doing this, then you need to know everything. No more secrets. No more protection through ignorance. Okay. He took her hand, led her to his office, unlocked a drawer in his desk, and pulled out a file 3 times as thick as the one he'd shown her before. This is everyone. Every name, every crime, every piece of Dimitri's organization that I've been systematically destroying for 5 years. He opened it, showed her page after page of surveillance photos, financial records, death certificates. This is what I am, what I've become. If you're staying, you need to understand exactly what you're choosing. Lillian looked through the file, saw the faces of men she'd never met, saw the brutality of the world Adrian lived in, saw the trail of bodies he'd left behind in his quest for revenge. She should have been horrified. She should have run. Instead, she just felt sad. Sad for the man Adrian had been before all this. Sad for Elena. Sad for everyone caught in the blast radius of Dimitri's cruelty. How many more? She asked quietly. Before I can move on Dimitri? 5. Maybe 6. His inner circle. Once they're gone, he'll be exposed. Vulnerable. And then? Then I kill him, personally. I've promised myself that much. Lillian closed the file. What if there was another way? There isn't. What if we used Marcus's evidence differently? Not to prosecute Dimitri. You're right, he's probably bought off anyone who matters. But what if we leaked it? Made it public? Destroyed his reputation so completely that his remaining allies abandoned him? Adrian went very still. That's risky. Dimitri backed into a corner with nothing to lose is the most dangerous version of Dimitri. But he'd be alone. No organization, no protection, just him. And he'd come for me with everything he has left. Let him. You'll be ready. Adrian studied her face. You've thought about this. I've thought about a lot of things, including the fact that you're planning to murder your uncle in cold blood and spend the rest of your life living with that. I can live with it. Can you? Or will it just be one more ghost haunting you? The question hit harder than Lillian expected. Adrian's expression cracked. I don't know, but I know I can't let him keep breathing. Not after what he did to my parents, to Elena, to... He stopped. To everyone I've ever cared about. Including me? Especially you. The admission hung between them. Lillian reached out, touched his face. The first time she'd initiated contact like this. Then let me help you end this. The right way. Not with more blood on your hands, but with the truth. Let Dimitri's own crimes destroy him. The truth isn't enough. It never is. Then we make it enough. Adrian caught her hand, pressed it against his cheek. You're asking me to trust that justice will actually happen, that doing things the right way will work. I stopped believing in that 7 years ago. I know, but maybe it's time to start again. They stood like that, caught between revenge and redemption, neither sure which path would lead them home. Finally, Adrian pulled away. I'll think about it, but I'm not making any promises. That's all I'm asking. A phone buzzed. Adrian checked it, his expression darkening. Victor found something. The leak. It's not one person. It's a system. Dimitri's been intercepting our communications for months. Every call, every message. He knows everything we've planned. Lillian's blood ran cold. How is that possible? Money, resources, time. Dimitri's had all 3. Adrian was already moving, pulling out a different phone, making calls. We need to assume everything's compromised. All our safe houses, all our plans, everything. What does that mean? It means Dimitri's going to move. Soon, while he still has the advantage. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw real fear in his eyes. And we're not ready. The attack came 2 days later. Lillian was in the garden with Thomas, learning about winter roses, when she heard the first gunshot. For a moment, her brain couldn't process it. The sound was wrong, too sharp, too violent for the peaceful afternoon. Then Victor was there, grabbing her arm, dragging her toward the house. Get inside. Now. More gunshots. Shouting. The sound of cars screeching up the driveway. Victor shoved her through the door, into Margaret's arms. Basement. Safe room. Don't come out until I come for you. Where's Adrian? Manhattan. We've called him. He's on his way. Now go. Margaret pulled her down a hallway Lillian had never noticed before, through a door hidden behind a bookshelf, down concrete stairs into a bunker that looked like something from a spy movie. Reinforced walls, surveillance feeds, weapons rack. What is this? Lillian's voice shook. Where we go when things go bad. Margaret locked the heavy door behind them. We'll be safe here. Mr. Volkov made sure of it. Above them, the sound of gunfire intensified. Lillian watched the surveillance feeds in horror. Men in tactical gear swarming the grounds, Victor and the other guards fighting back, trying to hold the line. It looked like a war zone. How many? Lillian whispered. Too many. Margaret's face was pale. This is Dimitri. He's finally made his move. The battle lasted 20 minutes. It felt like hours. Lillian watched men fall on both sides. Watched Victor take a bullet to the shoulder and keep fighting. Watched Rosa run from the kitchen, clutching a knife like she knew how to use it. Then suddenly, it was over. The attackers retreated. Engines roared. Tires squealed. Silence. Margaret reached for the door, but Lillian grabbed her arm. Wait, what if it's a trap? Victor will come for us when it's safe. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then footsteps on the stairs. Lillian's heart stopped. The door opened. Adrian stood there, covered in blood that probably wasn't his, holding a gun like he'd been born with it in his hand. His eyes found Lillian immediately. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. Adrian holstered the gun, crossed the room in 3 strides, and pulled her against him so hard she couldn't breathe. His hands shook where they gripped her. His heart hammered against her cheek. I thought... His voice broke. When Victor called, I thought I was too late. Thought I'd lost you before I could... He didn't finish. Lillian held on tight, feeling his fear bleed into her. I'm okay. I'm right here. They stood like that until Adrian's breathing steadied. Then he pulled back, his expression going cold and professional again. But Lillian had seen behind the mask, had seen the raw terror underneath. How bad? She asked. 3 of my men dead. 4 wounded, including Victor. Dimitri sent 20 men. We took out 12. Adrian's jaw was tight. He's not playing anymore. This was a statement. What kind of statement? That he can reach me anywhere. That nowhere is safe. That he'll take everything I care about until I have nothing left. Lillian's stomach twisted. So what do we do? I'm moving you. Tonight. Somewhere he can't find you. No. This isn't a discussion. You're right, it's not. Because I'm not leaving. Lillian stepped back, looked him in the eye. You were right before. Running won't save me, hiding won't save me. The only thing that saves either of us is ending this. Now. Tonight. Lillian, use the evidence. Leak it. Make it public. Destroy him before he destroys us. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue. Then something in his expression shifted. Calculation. Acceptance. If we do this, there's no going back. Dimitri will know it was us. He'll come with everything he has left. Let him. We'll be ready. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call. Do it, he said in Russian. Release everything, every file, every document. I want Dimitri's entire life exposed before midnight. He hung up, looked at Lillian. I hope you're right about this. So do I. They went upstairs to find the house in chaos. Rosa was bandaging Victor's shoulder. Thomas was boarding up windows. Margaret was on the phone with someone. her voice tight with stress. Adrian started giving orders, securing the perimeter, moving the wounded, preparing for the inevitable retaliation. Lillian should have felt useless, should have stayed out of the way. Instead, she helped Rosa with the wounded, helped Margaret coordinate with the hospital, made herself useful in the only way she could. Around 11, Adrian's phone buzzed. He checked it. His expression went neutral. It's done. The story's breaking. Every major news outlet. Dimitri's finished. Then why don't you look happy? Because now comes the hard part, surviving what happens next. As if on cue, Adrian's phone rang. He answered it, listened. His expression went dark. When? Where? A pause. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up. Looked at Lillian. Dimitri wants to meet. Just him and me. No weapons. No backup. Neutral ground. That's a trap. Probably. You can't go. I have to. This ends tonight, one way or another. Lillian felt ice flood her veins. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Adrian, no. This is the one thing I won't negotiate. You stay here. You stay safe. I finish this. He cupped her face in both hands. I need to know you're alive. Need to know that if this goes wrong, you'll survive. Please. The please broke her. Lillian nodded, tears burning her eyes. Come back to me. I'll try. He kissed her. Not gentle, not sweet. Hard and desperate and full of everything they'd been too afraid to say. Like he was trying to pour 7 years of grief and loneliness and hope into one moment. Then he pulled away and walked out the door. Lillian stood frozen, watching through the window as Adrian got into the SUV. As Victor limped after him, refusing to stay behind. As the car disappeared down the driveway into the darkness, Margaret touched her shoulder. He'll come back, he always does. But this time Lillian wasn't so sure. The waiting was unbearable. Lillian paced the length of the library, her phone clutched in her hand, willing it to ring. Margaret had tried to get her to eat something, but food felt impossible. Rosa had brought tea that went cold on the side table. Even the house itself felt like it was holding its breath. 2 hours passed, then 3. Lillian checked her phone for the 100th time. No messages, no calls, nothing. This is wrong, she said to the empty room. Something's wrong. Margaret appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Volkov, you should try to rest. I can't. Not until I know he's... Lillian's voice broke. What if Dimitri killed him? What if this was all just a setup to get Adrian alone? Mr. Volkov is smart. He wouldn't walk into a trap without a plan. Unless the plan was to end this no matter the cost. Lillian felt cold dread settling in her chest. He's been planning Dimitri's death for 7 years. What if he decided tonight was the night? What if he traded his life for... Her phone rang. Lillian nearly dropped it. Unknown number. Her hand shook as she answered. Hello? Lillian. Adrian's voice. Rough, exhausted, alive. I need you to listen very carefully. Where are you? Are you hurt? I'm fine, but I need you to do something for me. There's a man coming to the house. His name is James Monroe, FBI. Let him in. Tell him everything. What, Adrian, what's happening? Dimitri's dead. The words hit like a punch. You killed him, Lillian whispered. No. He killed himself. Adrian's voice was hollow. I'll explain everything when I get home. But right now, I need you to trust me. Talk to Monroe. Give him the evidence, all of it. This ends tonight, but it ends the right way. I don't understand. You will, I promise. Just trust me. Can you do that? Lillian's throat tightened. Yes. I'll be home in an hour. He hung up. Lillian stood frozen, trying to process what she'd just heard. Dimitri was dead. Adrian was alive, and the FBI was coming to their house. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across the windows. A black sedan pulled up to the entrance. A man in his 50s stepped out, badge visible on his belt. Margaret let him in. James Monroe looked exactly like what Lillian expected from an FBI agent, tired, skeptical, wearing a suit that had seen better days. He showed his credentials, introduced himself, and followed Lillian into Adrian's office without preamble. Mrs. Volkov, your husband contacted me 2 hours ago with information about Dmitry Volkov's criminal organization. He said you'd have additional evidence? Lillian pulled out the files Adrian had shown her. Marcus's insurance policy, the financial records, the surveillance photos. Everything. Monroe's expression grew darker with each page he turned. This is extensive. How long has your husband been gathering this? Years. He was trying to protect himself. Protect us. By taking down his own uncle? By ending a war that's been going on for decades. Lillian met Monroe's eyes. Dmitry Volkov killed Adrian's parents when he was a child. Killed the woman he loved 7 years ago. Tried to kill me 2 days ago. Adrian spent 5 years building a case against him because he knew the legal system was too corrupt to touch Dmitry any other way. Monroe was quiet for a long moment. Your husband is also a criminal, Mrs. Volkov. This evidence might take down Dmitry's organization, but it doesn't make Adrian innocent. I know that. He knows that too. That's why he called you. What do you mean? He's turning himself in, isn't he? That's what this is. He's giving you everything. Dmitry's crimes, his own crimes, all of it, because he's done running. Monroe's expression shifted. Something like respect flickered across his face. He didn't tell you. Tell me what? Adrian Volkov has been an FBI informant for the last 18 months. The room tilted. Lillian sat down hard in the nearest chair. That's not possible. It's very possible. We approached him after we discovered he was systematically dismantling Dmitry's organization, offered him immunity in exchange for cooperation. He refused at first, then Monroe paused. Then he got married, and his priorities changed. He did this for me, Lillian whispered. He did this for a lot of reasons, but yes, you were part of it. He wanted a way out that didn't end with him in prison or dead, wanted a future that was more than just revenge. Monroe pulled out a recording device. I'm going to need a full statement, everything you know, everything you've witnessed. Can you do that? Lillian nodded, her mind still reeling. She spent the next hour telling Monroe everything, the wedding, the rejection, the slow unraveling of Adrian's walls, Dmitry's threats, the attack on the house, Marcus's evidence, every detail she could remember. When she finished, Monroe looked grim. One more question. Tonight, when Adrian met with Dmitry, do you know what happened? He said Dmitry killed himself. That's what Adrian told me too, but I need to hear it from someone who wasn't there, who has no reason to lie. Monroe leaned forward. Do you believe him? Lillian thought about Adrian, about the man who'd spent 7 years planning revenge, who'd killed a dozen people in his quest for justice, who'd married her as a strategic move and somehow ended up caring anyway. Yes, she said quietly, I believe him, because if Adrian had killed Dmitry himself, he would have told me. He wouldn't lie about that, not to me. Monroe studied her face, then nodded. Okay, that's all I need for now. But I'll be back. This investigation is just beginning. He left just as dawn was breaking. Lillian stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the damaged grounds, and wondered what came next. Dmitry was dead. The FBI had everything they needed. Adrian was coming home. But what kind of home would it be? The sound of a car engine pulled her from her thoughts. The SUV appeared at the end of the driveway, moving slowly like it was carrying something fragile. Lillian ran. She made it to the front entrance just as the car pulled to a stop. Victor got out first, his shoulders still bandaged, moving stiffly. Then Adrian emerged from the back seat. He looked like he'd aged a decade in one night. His clothes were rumpled. Blood stained his shirt. Not his blood, Lillian realized with a jolt. His face was pale, exhausted, haunted. But his eyes found hers immediately, and something in them cracked open. You're alive, Lillian said stupidly. So are you. They stood there for a moment, 2 feet apart, neither sure how to bridge the distance. Then Adrian closed it. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair, and just held on. His whole body shook, not from cold, from something deeper, something breaking or maybe healing, Lillian couldn't tell which. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered against her temple. When Victor called during the attack, when I was 40 minutes away and couldn't get to you fast enough, I thought, I'm okay. We're okay. Adrian pulled back just enough to look at her. Monroe came? He came. I gave him everything. Lillian searched his face. Why didn't you tell me about working with the FBI? I couldn't. If Dimitri had found out, if anyone had found out before tonight, Adrian's jaw tightened. It was safer if you didn't know. I could have helped. You did help, by being here, by giving me a reason to want something more than revenge. They walked inside together. Margaret had coffee waiting. Rosa had somehow managed to put together breakfast despite everything. The house was slowly coming back to life around them. Adrian led Lillian to his office, closed the door. They sat across from each other in the morning light, and for the first time since they'd met, there were no more secrets between them. Tell me what happened tonight, Lillian said quietly. Adrian poured coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. I met Dimitri at the warehouse where they killed Elena. He chose the location deliberately. Wanted me to know he remembered. Wanted me angry and reckless. But you weren't. No, I was cold, calculated, everything he'd trained me to be. Adrian's voice went flat. He knew it was over the moment the evidence went public. Knew his organization was finished. His allies had already abandoned him. The FBI had warrants being issued. He had nothing left. So he killed himself. He gave me a choice. He had a gun. Said one of us wasn't leaving that warehouse alive. Said we could settle this the old way. Him and me. No witnesses. Winner takes everything. Lillian's blood ran cold. What did you say? I said no. Adrian met her eyes. 7 years I'd been planning to kill him. 7 years of revenge fantasies where I pulled the trigger myself. And when the moment came, all I could think about was you. About coming home to you. About having a future that was more than just blood and grief. What happened then? I told him the truth. That killing him wouldn't bring back my parents or Elena. That it wouldn't undo the last 7 years. That all it would do is make me exactly like him. A man so consumed by violence he'd forgotten how to be anything else. Adrian's voice cracked. I told him I was done. Done with revenge. Done with the war. Done letting him control my life even after he was gone. And he just gave up? He laughed, called me weak, said Elena had ruined me, said you'd finish the job. Adrian's hands clenched around his coffee cup. Then he put the gun to his own head and said if I wouldn't kill him, he'd do it himself. Said he'd rather die than watch me walk away. Did you try to stop him? No. The admission was quiet, final. I should have. Monroe's going to ask me that. The investigation will ask that. But the truth is, I watched him make that choice, and I didn't move. I let him pull the trigger. Lillian reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. That doesn't make you a murderer, doesn't it? No. It makes you human. It makes you someone who was given an impossible choice and chose not to become the thing you've been fighting against. Adrian looked at their joined hands like he couldn't quite believe they were real. I don't know how to do this. How to be someone who doesn't have revenge to focus on, who doesn't have an enemy to fight. You learn. We learn. Together. What if I can't? What if 7 years of this has broken something in me that can't be fixed? Then we deal with that too, but you don't get to decide you're broken beyond repair without even trying. A knock on the door interrupted them. Victor appeared, looking apologetic. Sorry to disturb, but there are people here, lawyers, FBI. They need to speak with Mr. Volkov. Adrian stood. How many? 6, maybe 7. This is going to take a while. Adrian looked at Lillian. You should rest. This doesn't concern you. Yes, it does. I'm your wife. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Something in Adrian's expression cracked open. Not the cold mask he'd worn for 7 years. Not the grief-stricken boy who'd lost everything. Something new. Something that looked almost like hope. Together, he repeated quietly. They spent the next 3 days drowning in legal proceedings. The FBI wanted statements. The lawyers wanted strategy sessions. The media wanted blood. Dimitri's death and the exposure of his criminal empire was the biggest story in years, and Adrian was at the center of it. But through it all, Lillian stayed. She sat through the depositions, listened to Adrian recount 7 years of careful planning, watched him take responsibility for his own crimes while providing evidence against Dimitri's organization. He was walking a razor's edge, cooperating fully while trying to minimize his own culpability. Monroe had been clear. Adrian's immunity covered specific actions he'd taken as an FBI informant, but there were years before that, crimes committed before he'd started cooperating. Those could still be prosecuted. "What's the worst-case scenario?" Lillian asked Monroe during a break. "Prison? 3 to 5 years, maybe. Your husband's lawyers are good, and he's been cooperative, but he's not walking away clean from this. And best case? House arrest, probation, community service. Depends on how the prosecutors want to play it." Monroe's expression softened. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Volkov, I've been doing this job for 25 years. I've seen a lot of criminals. Adrian's not one of them. Not really. He's a victim who learned to fight back the only way he knew how. Will that be enough? I don't know. But it's the truth." The truth ended up being enough. 6 weeks later, Adrian stood in front of a judge and pleaded guilty to racketeering and conspiracy charges. In exchange for his cooperation and the evidence he'd provided, he received 2 years of house arrest, 5 years of probation, and 1,000,000 hours of community service. No prison time. When the judge read the sentence, Lillian watched Adrian's shoulders drop like he'd been carrying a weight for 7 years and finally got to put it down. They drove back to Westchester in silence. The estate looked different now, smaller somehow, with half the security detail gone and the constant sense of danger lifted. It felt less like a fortress and more like a house, like a home. That night they had dinner together. Not because it was Thursday, not because of any agreement, just because they wanted to. "What happens now?" Lillian asked over dessert that Rosa had made special, some complicated Russian cake that she swore Adrian's mother used to make. "I have no idea." Adrian looked almost lost. "I've spent my entire adult life planning Dimitri's downfall. Now that it's done, I don't know what comes next." "What do you want to come next?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I want to fix what I've broken. The legitimate parts of my business, the hotels, the real estate, I want to run them properly. No more money laundering, no more criminal connections, just business. That's a start. I want to help people. The community service, I'm supposed to work with at-risk youth, kids who grew up like I did. I think I could actually do some good there. I think you could too. And I want—" Adrian stopped, started again. "I want to be a real husband, not just on paper, not just for appearances. I want to learn how to do this, how to be someone worth staying with." Lillian's throat tightened. "You already are." "I'm really not, but maybe I could be, if you're patient with me." "I've been patient for months. I can be patient a little longer." Adrian reached across the table, took her hand. "I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first Thursday dinner when you called me out for running away. Maybe when you stood up to Dimitri. Maybe when you refused to leave even when I begged you to. But somewhere in all of this, I fell in love with you. And I don't know what to do with that." Lillian felt tears burning her eyes. "You could start by kissing me." "I could do that." He did. Not like the desperate kiss before he left to face Dimitri. Not like the performative kiss at their wedding. This was slow and careful and full of promise, like a beginning instead of an ending. When they pulled apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to mess this up," he whispered. "I'm going to have bad days. Days where I can't get out of bed because I'm back in that warehouse with Elena. Days where I look at you and panic because I'm terrified of losing you too." "I know." "And you're staying anyway?" "I'm staying anyway." "Why?" "Because I love you too. And because everyone deserves a second chance, even men who spent 7 years planning revenge." Adrian kissed her again, and again. And when he finally pulled back, he was smiling. Actually smiling. The first real smile Lillian had seen from him since they'd met. "Come on," he said, standing and pulling her to her feet. "There's something I want to show you." He led her upstairs, past her wing, past his wing, to a door at the end of the hall that had always been locked. "I had the staff fix this up. It's not much, but—" Adrian opened the door. It was a bedroom. Not his, not hers, theirs. The furniture was new but comfortable. The colors were warm instead of cold. There were photos on the dresser, of them at the cancer gala, looking almost happy, of the estate grounds, of Lillian in the garden. I thought maybe we could try, Adrian said quietly. Sharing a space, being actually married instead of just playing the part. Lillian looked around the room, feeling something warm unfold in her chest. When did you do this? While I was dealing with the FBI, I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted. This was at the top of the list. A bedroom? A life. With you. A real one. Lillian turned to face him. Then let's start living it. They spent that night in their new room, learning how to exist in the same space, learning how to fall asleep next to someone else, learning how to wake up and see a future that was more than just survival. The next morning, Lillian woke to find Adrian already awake, watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. What? She asked, self-conscious. I was just thinking about how lucky I am, that your father made bad business decisions, that you agreed to marry me, that you were stubborn enough to stay even when I tried to push you away. That's a weird definition of lucky. Maybe, but it's true. Adrian traced a finger along her cheek. You saved me. You know that, right? Not from Dimitri, not from prison, from myself. From becoming someone so consumed by grief and rage that there was nothing left. You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you could. Same thing. They lay there in comfortable silence until Rosa knocked on the door to announce breakfast. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Adrian started his community service, working with kids from broken homes. He was terrible at it at first, too stiff, too formal, too uncomfortable with emotions. But slowly, he learned to listen, learned to share his own story, learned to be the kind of mentor he'd never had. Lillian started working with a nonprofit that helped families dealing with debt, turning her own experience into something useful. She coordinated with Adrian's lawyers to help other families avoid the kind of desperation that had led to her marriage in the first place. Thursdays remained sacred. Dinner together, just the two of them, no phones, no distractions, but they also added other rituals. Morning coffee in the garden, evening walks through the grounds, visiting Elena's grave together, Adrian finally allowing Lillian into that part of his grief. Caroline came by once, surprising them both. She stood in the foyer looking at Lillian with an expression that was equal parts wariness and curiosity. I heard what happened, with Dimitri, with the FBI. It's over, Lillian said quietly. Really over this time. Caroline looked past her to where Adrian stood in the doorway to his office. For a moment, Lillian thought she might leave, might turn around and walk away from the man who'd failed to save her sister. Instead, Caroline walked toward him. Elena loved you, she said, even at the end. Even when everything was terrible, she loved you. Adrian's expression cracked. I know. And she'd want you to be happy, to move on, to find... Caroline glanced at Lillian. To find someone who makes you want to live again. I'm trying. I can see that. Caroline pulled out a small box, pressed it into Adrian's hands. These were hers, her grandmother's earrings. She always said if she couldn't have them, she wanted them to go to someone you loved, someone who'd appreciate them. Adrian opened the box. The earrings were simple, elegant, timeless. He looked at Lillian. Would you? Yes, Lillian said quietly. Caroline stayed for coffee. They talked about Elena, not the tragedy of her death, but the beauty of her life, the music she'd loved, the books she'd read, the terrible jokes she used to tell. It hurt, but it was a good hurt, the kind that came from healing instead of festering. When Caroline left, she hugged them both. Take care of him, she said to Lillian. I will. And you? Caroline turned to Adrian. Take care of her. Don't waste this second chance. I won't. Life continued. 6 months became a year. The house arrest was lifted. Adrian's probation continued, but it became routine. Background noise instead of a constant reminder. They traveled, carefully, with permission, but they traveled. Lillian showed Adrian her favorite places from college. Adrian showed Lillian the city where his mother had grown up in Russia, before everything went wrong. They fought sometimes. Adrian had triggers, loud noises, arguments that got too heated. anything that reminded him of Dmitri. Lillian had her own issues: fear of abandonment, anxiety about money, nightmares about the attack on the estate, but they worked through it. They went to therapy, together and separately. They learned how to communicate, how to recognize when old wounds were bleeding into new situations, how to be patient with each other's broken pieces. And slowly, carefully, they built something new from the ruins of what they'd both lost. 2 years after Dimitri's death, Lillian stood in the garden where she'd first learned about roses from Thomas. The estate had transformed, less fortress, more home. Adrian had opened parts of the grounds to the community. Kids from his mentorship program came for weekend retreats. The stables housed horses again, not Elena's, but new ones, teaching troubled teens about responsibility and care. Adrian found her there as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I have something for you," he said. He pulled out a small box. Lillian's breath caught. "Adrian, I know we're already married, but we did it for the wrong reasons. Because your father owed money, because I needed legitimacy, because we were both desperate and broken and didn't know what else to do." Adrian opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, nothing like the massive diamond he'd given her at their first wedding. "I want to ask you again. The right way this time. Not because I have to, because I want to. Because I love you. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it." He knelt in the garden dirt, not caring about his expensive pants. "Lillian Hart Volkov, will you marry me? Again? For real this time?" Lillian laughed through her tears. "We're already married, you idiot." "I know, but I want to do it right. Want to stand in front of people and tell them that you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Want to kiss you at the altar because I want to, not because I'm supposed to. Want to start our life together the way it should have started, with truth instead of transaction." "Yes," Lillian whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you. Again. As many times as you want." Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger next to the massive diamond she still wore. They didn't match, didn't go together at all. Lillian loved them both. They planned a small ceremony. Nothing like the cathedral spectacle that had started this mess. Just family and close friends in the garden. Maya was maid of honor. Victor stood up as Adrian's best man, his shoulder fully healed, a rare smile on his scarred face. Lillian's parents came, looking older but happier. The house saved, the debt gone, their family intact. Margaret cried through the whole ceremony. Rosa made a cake that was somehow even more elaborate than the one at the first wedding. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Adrian didn't hesitate. He pulled Lillian close, kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment, and whispered against her lips, "My heart belongs to you. Only you. Always you." Lillian kissed him back, tasting salt from both their tears, and whispered, "I know. I've known since that first Thursday dinner when you finally let me see past the walls. I love you. I love you too." They pulled apart to applause and cheers, and Victor yelling something in Russian that made Adrian laugh, actually laugh, loud and genuine and full of joy. The reception lasted until late into the night. Music played, people danced, stories were shared. For the first time in 7 years, Adrian looked at peace. Later, after everyone had left and the staff had cleaned up, Lillian and Adrian stood on the terrace where they'd had their first real conversation. "Are you happy?" Lillian asked. Adrian pulled her close, tucked her against his side. "I didn't think I could be after everything, after Dmitri, after Elena. I thought I'd used up my chance at happiness. And now? Now I know that happiness isn't something you run out of. It's something you choose. Every day. Every moment. And I choose this. I choose you. I choose us." Lillian rested her head on his shoulder, looking out at the grounds that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home. They stood there until the stars came out, two people who'd started as strangers bound by debt and ended as partners bound by choice. Two people who'd survived the worst and found something worth living for in the ruins. The man who'd forgotten how to love had learned again. The woman who'd thought she'd lost her future had found a better one. And together, they built a life that was messy and imperfect and real. It wasn't the fairy tale Lillian had imagined as a child. It was better. Because it was theirs. Years later, when people asked Lillian about her marriage, she never told them about the cathedral rejection. Never mentioned Dmitri or the FBI or the violence that had nearly destroyed them both. She told them the truth that mattered, that she'd married a man who was broken and afraid, and he'd married a woman who refused to give up on him, that they'd chosen each other every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. That love wasn't a moment, it was a series of choices, and they kept choosing each other. Adrian stood in a community center in the Bronx, talking to a kid whose father was in prison and whose mother was struggling with addiction. The kid reminded him of himself at that age, angry, scared, convinced the world had nothing good to offer. "It gets better," Adrian said quietly. "Not all at once, not easily, but if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to accept help when it's offered, it gets better." "You promise?" Adrian thought about the last 3 years, about Lillian sleeping in his arms every night, about Thursday dinners that had expanded to include laughter and music and hope, about Elena's earrings that Lillian wore on special occasions, honoring the past while building the future. "Yeah," he said, "I promise." "Pa." The kid didn't look convinced, but he nodded, and that was enough for now. Adrian drove home as the sun set, thinking about how far he'd come from the man who'd rejected his bride at the altar, how far they'd both come. When he pulled into the driveway, Lillian was waiting on the front steps, reading a book in the fading light. She looked up when she heard the car, smiled that smile that still made his chest tight. "How was your day?" she asked as he climbed the steps. "Long." "Yours?" "Productive. I think we helped 6 families today avoid foreclosure." "That's good. That's really good." Lillian stood, wrapped her arms around his waist. "You okay? You look tired." "I'm fine. Just thinking." "About?" "About how lucky I am, that you're stubborn, that you stayed when any sane person would have run, that you saw something worth fighting for when I'd given up on myself. I didn't do anything special." "You did everything." Adrian kissed her forehead. "Come on. Rosa made that beef stroganoff you love." They went inside together, into the home they'd built from ashes and choices and stubborn hope, and somewhere, in whatever came after, Elena smiled, because the man she'd loved had finally learned how to live again, and that was all she'd ever wanted for him.